who's in charge of that product? We couldn't find a single person on the Google team or like anywhere on LinkedIn that was responsible for Google Vacation Rentals. Between us and the listeners here, I think that's an abandoned product. They either need to double down on it and make it good, or kill it and move on and just not do it anymore.
How can you wean your STR business off the OTAs and attract more direct bookings? What pages must every direct booking website have? What are the common SEO and social media mistakes that short-term rental managers are making? And is Google Vacation Rentals a waste of time? Conrad O'Connell from BuildUp Bookings is the special guest on today's House Planet podcast, and he'll be answering all these questions and more during this episode. Conrad, thank you for joining us on the House Planet podcast. If a manager is completely OTA dependent, what's your roadmap for driving direct bookings in the first 3 months?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think it's, a lot of people are in this bucket. If I may, maybe it may be worth exploring a little bit further as to why that's the case. Like, I would probably want to sit down first and understand, like, what are they currently doing? Are they trying things that aren't working? That may give me some information on what they need to do. Or are they doing nothing, which is, of course, somewhat common as well. If they're doing nothing, it's sort of a different action plan than if they're doing something and it's not working well. But let's start with the doing nothing bucket, because that might be a little bit simpler, or at least for people to kind of understand and process. Maybe people haven't done nothing, but they've done close to nothing. So that might be a good starting point. It starts with the foundation. Obviously, the property itself should be desirable. I talk at length on the other podcasts that I do, Heads in Bed Show, a lot about this idea of a specialty property, a unique property versus a commodity property. And I think that if someone's getting all OTA bookings and it's a very commoditized listing, it's very, very challenging to get, a good chunk or a decent chunk of direct bookings. So that's like the first thing I would say is, like, do you have a product that is actually desirable enough to enough people to where when they saw an ad or they saw an outbound message from you on an email or an SMS or whatever the case may be, do they actually want to act on it? So that's like almost the first thing to think about and understand a little bit more. But practically speaking, if someone's like looking to kind of start on that journey, I think the buckets that we focus on the most are search traffic, paid and organic, social media traffic, paid and organic. And then I'm kind of rephrasing this now to outbound traffic, which is, I used to just say email marketing, but I feel like now we have enough clients doing SMS or maybe overseas or elsewhere. I know WhatsApp is very popular, not as popular here in the States, but I know it's very popular elsewhere. That kind of fits in that outbound bucket to me of, email, SMS, WhatsApp, that sort of thing. That's kind of the third bucket. So those are the things that you're starting with. And then you're determining, what is my level of engagement? What is my level of investment that I'm willing to make in those different channels? What can I do? What can I outsource? How do my margins look? That's a very different discussion. But those are kind of the buckets that I think you're going to initially focus on when you have the right property and the right website that you're sending people to.
Okay, real talk now for all you hosts out there. You know that moment when your guest messages you again with, "Hey, what's the Wi-Fi code?" Or you're staring at 5 different calendars, wondering if you've accidentally double booked the cottage. Yes, we've all been there. That's why here at House Planet, we recommend Hostfully. It's basically your rentals control center. It handles bookings across all the big platforms, syncs your calendars to ensure there are no double bookings, automates guest messages, and even creates these really slick digital guidebooks that stop all the repeat questions. Honestly, it just makes your life easier and keeps your guests happier, helping you achieve those all-important 5-star reviews. And here is a little bonus. If you're a House Planet listener, you can get $500 off onboarding for Hostfully's property management software and 30% off digital guidebooks for life. Just hit the link in the show notes and use the codes PLANET500 for the PMS and HousePlanetGB for the guidebooks. And if you'd like a proper walkthrough, there's also a link to book a demo with Frank Bosey from Hostfully. He will show you how it all works. Less stress, more bookings, sorted with Hostfully. What's the normal scenario when people approach you and say, "I want more direct bookings"? Have they been doing much, or have they just been failing at what they've been doing?
It's a good question. I would say it depends, is obviously the answer. I think if someone's coming as like an individual host where it's like they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 properties, Most of the time they'd be doing very little, unless they have very, very unique luxury properties where they have a lot more margin built in, or it's something that they designed from the beginning. Like I would say 1 out of every 20 leads we get is someone who's like, no, I knew what I was going to do before I even started. And like I had a plan in mind, or I had a plan in place. And they're someone who's already getting 20, 30, 40, 50% direct. And they're like, I want more, or I want to be able to do more things. And that's kind of a different bucket. But yeah, 18, 19 out of 20 leads that we're going to get in that smaller host bucket are people that are like, I'm not doing a lot, or I have like a simple website, or my PMS gave me a website, but I'm not really doing much with it. But I would kind of separate that host crowd from like the professional property manager crowd, which in most cases, like they've been doing this for a long time, especially people that have been in business for very long, let's say 10 plus years, that sort of thing. You can almost draw a line like COVID, before COVID, if they've been in business at least a few years before that, it's like, it was probably part of their mix already. And those are people more so who are doing something, but they're questioning its effectiveness. Is it working as well as it could? Is the partner we have the right partner? Do we need to sign on and do something different? So it's kind of like those different, engagements, will differ a little bit depending on exactly what people's setup is and the type of company reaching out, that sort of thing.
Are there scenarios where direct bookings perhaps don't make a lot of sense because there is an investment required, and there will be hosts and property managers out there, maybe they're getting 75, 80% occupancy rate, it's all coming from the OTAs, and they just think, well, I'm fine with that, and I don't really want to spend money on direct bookings, because direct bookings are not free, right?
No, they're not free. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's lots of scenarios where I think it doesn't make sense. I mean, we talked at the beginning about this idea of like commodity or specialty. If you have a very commoditized listing and you have low rates, like there's a very, very, very thin line for you to potentially get a lot of direct bookings, right? It's going to be super challenging. So if you have a property that's, the example I typically give here in the States, I'm in the Myrtle Beach market, but I usually give the Orlando market, Florida market as an example. I think there's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 30 to 40,000, short-term rentals in a 5 or 6 mile radius around the Disney parks in Orlando, Florida. It's like, if you have a $100 a night condo in one of those 34,000 listings, like there's going to be is it impossible for you to get direct bookings? No, of course not. But like, it's going to be a very, very thin line, like I said, for you to have success with direct. So yeah, I think you need to look at your business and what you want out of it. And by the way, like, I think some people want me to like take the stance against Airbnb or whatever, or the OTAs. I'm not really like that, because I think that whatever path you decide, you just have to be okay with the downsides of that path. That would be my take on that. So if you're completely OTA dependent, that you're not looking to go down the direct booking route. But in exchange, you're like, yeah, Airbnb might change the fee rules like they did, a week or two ago. They might change this payout rule. They might change this rule. You're in that boat, and Brian Chesky's the captain. And if you're cool with that and you trust him, like that's fine. Like I've no problem with that. Like I think I've told this story before on different podcasts, not recently though. My dad was an eBay power seller for many, many years. I think he opened his eBay account in like 1999 or 2000 or something like that when I was a kid. And his like sort of niche, if you will, was he plays guitar, and he plays left-handed guitar. So it's like a niche within a niche. People who buy guitars, vintage guitars on eBay is already a small group of people. And then within that world, he's left-handed, so that's like less than 1% of guitars made are left-handed. And so over the years, the policies kind of got like more and more purchaser friendly and less seller friendly on eBay. And it was kind of like, that was his business, was selling on eBay. I mean, it was more of a side hustle than a business, but it was like, and he didn't like it, but he's like, yeah, like, I'm not going to go like set up a website or set up a store to sell my things. It's like, that's the platform on, that's the rules that I have to abide by. So what I don't like is people that are OTA dependent, don't want to do direct bookings, but then complain constantly, about the rules that they've signed up for. It's like, that's the combination of things that I don't like. That's the triumvirate that I sort of, get a little eye twitchy about. But if you're like down that path and you're okay with it and you understand it, I think that's perfectly fine. Yeah.
Yeah, there are payoffs on both sides of the equation without a shadow of a doubt. Let's talk direct booking websites then. So what pages must every direct booking website have to boost traffic?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately the ones that really matter the most, if you're just looking from a practical standpoint, is, some kind of search results page or some kind of, availability page. Certainly if you have multiple listings, you're going to have like a list of search results. If you have one listing, you probably don't need that. You just need to drive people straight into the property page, which I could think would kind of be the next thing. So you're going to have a homepage, you're going to have search results if you're multi-property. If not, you could skip that and go to the property page. If you're one host, you're going to have one property detail page. If obviously you're a property manager or a multi-property host, you're going to have many different property detail pages. You have a start checkout process or like a checkout page, and then you have a confirmation page. So at its core, like that's all you need, right? But the things that actually help beyond that, that you other than just the basic functionality, you probably want to consider. Heather Bayer talks about this a lot, like an About Us page. Like I think that's often so missing. We just signed a new client the other day, and I didn't deal with them. Someone on my sales team did, and I went to the website for the first time looking at it after they signed, and I was like, I don't know anything about this company. I don't know who's behind it. I don't know the names of anybody, and it was just, it kind of reminded me of what Heather talks about at length of just like, show your face, show the people behind the company. So can you get direct bookings on an About Us page? Yes, but like, why make it harder than you need to? Like, you want to build some of that trust. So I think a lot of social proof is missing a lot of vacation rental websites, whether that be on a separate page or the homepage. I think a lot of like personalization is missing. I think a lot of typically like better than standard photo content is missing a lot of pages as well. So having like a video walkthrough tour and having that be embedded on the page, can't do that on Airbnb. You can do that on your website. So use those, extra little flourishes that you can put on your website to the best of your ability. But yeah, at its core, like those are the pages that our people are going to choose when they go through the booking process. Everything else, maybe we can call it window dressing, but I would say it's important window dressing if you're trying to get someone to like trust you, especially if it's a high purchase, high dollar purchase type thing. I always say to people, clients for the first time when we start to work with them in some situations, I'm like, okay, someone has their credit card, they have your website open, and they're about to charge $3, $5, $6, $10, $15,000 maybe, depending on how expensive your property is for a week. Why should they do that? Like, why should they trust you? There's so many risks in their mind entering when they're holding that credit card. Like, what are we doing to try to make it seem like that's a safe thing to do? And then you kind of work backwards from there and start to figure out some of those things.
It's a great point about the About Us. I was actually looking at an event company the other day, and brilliant website, really, really detailed, everything you wanted to know. But there was no About page. I had no idea who was actually running the business. And 100% right. I was like, do I trust these guys? I'm not sure. SEO then. So this is a big deal for any business, particularly for short-term rental property managers. What are the most common SEO mistakes that you fix for vacation rental managers?
Just, it sounds silly, but on page, I mean, that's the number one thing we're fixing. If we're getting a new website, like most of the time the on page is bad, or the content is, the word I choose to use is comprehensive. The content is not as comprehensive as it needs to be. So, they write a very short description on a page. They don't have much information on a page. And we just have to go through the process of building out those pages to be significantly more detailed, have significantly more content and information on them, or again, towards this goal of comprehensive. I don't think of like as like a word count or like an exact number of pages or headings or substructures. I think of what's everything on that page that would make it completely comprehensive for someone to choose to book an event or choose to book a vacation rental or holiday or let or whatever the case may be, right? So I think those are the things that we most often fix are, on-page related things. And then I think what most people are missing that takes a long time to fix, especially if they're a smaller host, is links. Like, just no one knows about the website. Like, no one's referenced the website. No one's mentioned the website. So as a result, you could actually have like quote unquote perfect on-page SEO, and it doesn't matter much because no one's actually going through and looking at it, and it's not going to rank in Google without any links. So that's, I would say, like the thing that people skip over, and they kind of like, I'll get to that later type thing, and then they don't get to it, and their site doesn't make a lot of progress, even with good on-page SEO or good content, without a lot of links pointing to it as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, if you've got a website and you're a property manager, and a lot of people do, but they don't point anybody to it, what are the maybe simple things that you can do that are not particularly time consuming to make sure that you're driving a bit of traffic?
Yeah, I mean, on the SEO side in particular, or just in general?
SEO and in general.
Yeah. So SEO wise, I think like start with your partner, start with people that you already refer business over to. Like, that's a very logical thing to start with. So, if you're local property manager, a local vacation rental manager, and you already send people to a certain restaurant, you already recommend a certain vendor or a certain service, go on their website and be like, oh, do you have a page on your website about like where to stay or like lodging partners? And they may say, no. Cool. Create one, add us on there. Like that's a really good starting point. Like, just chat with people you already know, chat with local businesses that you're already referring business to, because you have some baseline there. It's not like doing cold outreach, which is a lot of what we do in our agency, where it's like, if we're being honest, it's a numbers game. We do everything in our power to like shade the numbers in our favor and make it, more effective for us to get links through outreach. But it's just a grind of like sending out hundreds of emails to get a handful of links, basically, on the outbound side of things. So you'll get there maybe eventually, but like start with your local partners first, get your first 20, 30 links through, Chamber of Commerce, get a listing on there, obviously have all your social media profiles claimed, have a link there, go to your local businesses that you already refer business or send business to, get some links there. And that'll kind of get you at least out of the starting blocks. And then, at some point you'll be like, okay, I've exhausted like everyone in my contact list. Now I have to go out into the other world of link building and get more references or citations or mentions from there. So that's that side of it. The other thing, though, just in general of like that starting point of the website traffic, I think a lot of it is brand. We didn't touch on that yet, but it's like having something that's actually easily searchable. I think what you don't want to have, and we see this a lot, is an Airbnb listing or a VRBO listing or whatever the case may be. And it's lovely, city front property, with a view or something like that. Like, that is a perfectly reasonable Airbnb title, but it's not what you actually want to brand the listing around, right? You want to have welcome to the example I was given in my podcast is Conrad's Cool Cabin Rentals, which is not a real company, but it's just like that's the fictional company that I give as an example. And maybe each property would have a name within that portfolio. So it'd be Welcome to Julian's Hideaway, that's my son's name, at Conrad's Cool Cabin Rentals. And then that's the first line of your Airbnb description. That's like a very good prompting, like starting point to say like, okay, that's a name that's could be presented throughout the property, by the way, like an actual signage in the property that could be presented in the guidebook material, that could be presented in when you go to the property and there's a little key, you're entering this property. Those are all things that I think get some initial brand search, because on Google you want to find a name that people aren't using, that no one else is using, and that's actually going to be your first probably 10, 20, 30 direct bookings anyways. It's just people finding your website off platform. And you don't have to do anything against the terms of service to do that. People will just search it naturally and get your first direct bookings that way. I think that's like the little momentum that gets you going. And then from there, you need to attract new people. But that's a good starting point for sure.
Yeah, and another good starting point as well is just, trying to turn those OTA bookers into direct bookers if they want to come back next time. Even simple things like QR code in your listing and just letting them know that you have a direct booking website.
Yeah, it's shocking. So we get a lot of StayFi customers, people that are using StayFi, which I think is a good solution. Sorry for the free ad read on the podcast here, but they're solid at what they do. And we have people they'll come to us and be like, oh, I've got the StayFi system installed, and they gave me all the right tools and all the right information, and nothing on StayFi's end. I just didn't do enough with it. Like I didn't do much with it. And we had someone the other day reach out to who like had collected, I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 30,000 emails, a property manager here in the States in Colorado, and had sent like 2 or 3 emails to them over the course of a few years, and then started to try to market to them with a different company. And he was getting very poor results, and I was like, yeah, they forgot. Like there's not much mystery here. Like they stayed with you several years ago, you had their email, but if you didn't do anything with it, their memory just gets completely reset. They might have remembered that stay they had in Colorado, but they didn't remember exactly their experience with you, and exactly the name of your company, et cetera, et cetera. So when they got that email here in 2025 for a stay that it might have happened in 2020, I mean, so many things have happened between now and then, like their brain just, completely cleared that stuff out. So he was sort of angling towards the idea that like this email marketing team that he hired did a bad job. And I'm like, no, you did a bad job. Like you didn't reach out and message to them, at least with some level of consistency. So as a result, you had a list of customers and it turned into just a random list, essentially over time. It's almost like what I always say is like, it's like milk, it expires, like it's not going to stay good forever. So.
30,000. What a waste. Goodness me.
Yeah.
So how should property managers use Google Business Profile to promote their brand?
It's tricky because you've got to realize what the rules are and are not. I think a lot of people set up these business profiles on individual homes, which is kind of clearly against their terms of service, and they get away with it. That's the dangerous part about this whole thing. And maybe they get away with it for an extended period of time. They might get away with it for 6 months, a year, 2 years, and then they think, oh, okay, like I this was deserved of me, like I should have had this listing, and then it gets taken away, and they get very upset at Google, or they're mad, or they hire us to try to fix it, and the whole time they weren't really supposed to have that listing. So I think first of all, I'm not opposed to this like the theology or this philosophy of like, okay, I'm going to have a listing, set up in Google My Business, even though I'm not really supposed to. Like you should have an office address for Google My Business. And then from there, it's like, okay, yeah, then there's reviews that you want to build on that profile. There's citations you want to build on that profile. There's, make sure your hours are in there. All the information's up to date. It's not really like a massively complicated procedure, in my opinion. I really think it's just having reviews from direct bookings that are sent out, post departure. They're going to Google is like a very healthy and logical way to get there. But I would say like, first understand if you can or can't have that listing. And if you can't have that listing and you have one, just know that you're kind of probably playing on borrowed time. Do the best you can, but I think your best bet long term, if you're trying to build up that as a sustainable marketing channel, is to actually do it the right way. And like if you're a property manager, have an office with signage that can actually be verified on Google. If you're a host, you probably can't have like a listing at your property unless you make serious modifications to it. Like it's more of a bed and breakfast listing on Google as opposed to a vacation or home rental listing. So yeah, like first know what you're playing, play by the rules. Or if you're not playing by the rules, again, kind of see my Airbnb conversation from a few minutes ago. Do what you can to optimize that listing, but know that it can get taken at any time. And that's the tricky part about Google right now with vacation rentals is they're pushing people into this Google vacation rental product, which has very little uptake and very little success, by the way, as a sidebar. But they don't want individual homes listed as like businesses on Google. They want them in this other product, through one of their PMS partners. So.
Sticking with Google vacation rentals then. So what's the best path to show your direct booking website in Google Vacation Rentals? And are there any common setup errors that keep owners from appearing there that you've seen?
I'll be honest, I don't know if I've got this nailed down yet, because I know a lot of the PMS platform providers obviously do the connection. Like you have to use a PMS platform provider to get your listings in there, right? And many of them are out there. I don't know if you have any like sponsors on the show that, do it or whatever, but pick down the list or go to the Google page and you can find all the ones that are listed there. But I haven't really been able to crack at this point in time. Like, is there some hack? Is there some optimization within Google? Like, I feel like I understand pretty well how Google search works and Google Ads and a lot of these platforms. Google Vacation Rentals, I'll see listings in there that are brand new, that have no listings, no reviews. Then I scroll down half the page and I see a listing with 87 reviews, all 5 stars, that you would assume would do better on there, that has more traffic, more brand awareness, more listing history, let's say, on these platforms and stuff like that. So I think that's almost like the awkward thing is that Google's kind of like ignored that product. They're not really investing into that product. It's not picking up significant shares of inventory, that's for sure. Like, it's not getting more listings from the major OTA platforms for the most part, where it's mostly just, getting little chips in here and there from their PMS partners. And like, who's in charge of that product? Like, I actually did this one day. Paul and I did a podcast a little while ago, like updating where Google was on Google Vacation Rentals. And we couldn't find a single person on the Google team or like anywhere on LinkedIn that was responsible for Google Vacation Rentals. Anyone who was previously responsible for it had a new title at Google. So I think it's between, us and the listeners here. I think that's an abandoned product, and it's just a matter of time before Google they either need to double down on it and make it good, or kill it and move on and just not do it anymore. Because right now, where it's sitting right now, I don't think that it's a meaningful traffic source or a meaningful booking source for very many of our clients.
Interesting. If you do want to get on Google Vacation Rentals, even though it might not be worth it by the sound of it, this show is sponsored by Hostfully. You need to use a PMS, so check out Hostfully and you can get yourself.
And there's no harm. Yeah, like, there's no harm in doing it, right? Like, and so yeah, use Hostfully. That's a great platform to do it on for sure. But like, I pulled down. We talked about this at DARM last year for a key data dashboard. They have data for, I don't even know how many listings, many thousands, if not 100,000 listings, that sort of thing. And they have source data where the booking actually comes from. And, I'd asked them, I was like, is anyone other than Airbnb, Direct, Booking.com, and Vrbo and their US data getting more than 1% of the booking share? And their answer was no. So like, that means Marriott Homes and Villas is not getting more than 1%. Google Vacation Rentals is not getting more than 1%, on and on and on, home to go down the list. Now there's individual property managers who are getting more than 1% or 2 or 3% from those other platforms. But in their like whole data set across the whole country, that was not the case. So, if you look at it, it's really like there's 3 big fish in Booking.com, Airbnb, and Vrbo, at least here in the States. I don't know as well, over in the UK and stuff like that. So there's obviously different markets over there that I'm not as savvy about. And then it's direct. So it's like, those are your 3 channels plus direct. That's where you're going to get 90% of all your bookings from. The rest is just a little bit here and there.
Yeah, UK and Europe, we've got Airbnb and Booking.com are the big 2. Vrbo, little bit, but it's a small percentage. And then, of course, direct and a few other smaller platforms, niche platforms here and there. Sure. Okay, so what are your top tips for property managers when it comes to utilizing social media to drive people to your direct booking website?
Yeah, I think one thing that we've kind of learned, I would say the hard way a little bit over the last year or two, is that video content is really king on social nowadays. And really, when we say social, Instagram is kind of like the platform where I think a lot of this has had the most reach. I would say our Facebook ads can do quite well, and placement wise on Facebook, that's more of an audience question. Does the audience itself tend to prefer using Facebook or Instagram? But if the goal is I'm trying to drive more awareness, social is the platform that I'm doing it on. We have so many examples now of people doing it well, on Instagram through short vertical video. Like, that is the mechanism that seems to drive the most demand. And if you go look at people that have had a lot of success, that's kind of the path that they've gone down. So, is there ways to get some social traffic from other sources? Absolutely. But again, going back to like that conversation of like, what are the big fish that really move the needle? What are the ones that really move the needle? I would say double down on video, double down on Instagram. And that's going to be the path that's going to most likely lead you to success, with some, cross-posting on Facebook as well, depending on your audience, of course, too.
You mentioned there paid search and social media ads. What should property managers be doing in this area?
I think the number one mistake I see people make on meta ads is that they don't actually choose the right objective. I know this sounds very simple, but it's like they start an ad on social, on let's say on Instagram or Facebook, and they just want their objective they select is like traffic or clicks or those sorts of things. When you do that, unfortunately, you don't actually get any of the relevant people who are actually likely to convert targeted very well on Facebook. You're basically just telling Facebook, hey, send traffic to my website. And Facebook will do that. Facebook and Instagram will do that. They have no problem taking your money and charging you, and giving you traffic. But that's not really what your objective is. Your objective is not traffic. Your objective is either A, a booking, or B, something that's going to lead to a booking, like an email sign up, a promo code download, a guide download, at least doing some other key action like starting a checkout or entering dates. Those are things that are more tangible as far as like getting more bookings. So I think that's the number one mistake, honestly, is like the creative is not very good, or the tracking is not setting up properly. So I'm not even telling Facebook or Instagram what I want to be achieving with the ad. Once you do those things, get a good creative and you have the tracking set up, the rest of the targeting just becomes a little bit more straightforward because you can quickly figure out like, okay, I spent, X dollars over here. It didn't work. I spent X dollars over here. I got 7 people to make a booking. Excellent. Let me double down on that and do more of it. So you don't have to be much of like a media buying guru if you've got good creative and good tracking, because you'll just figure it out a little bit along the way. There are a lot of nuances in tracking and things that, targeting that do make sense to test and figure out. But it's like, those are the 2 big rocks that I see in the way of people having success. And when we go look at Facebook ads accounts, like whenever we see like a traffic objective campaign, I can take that same spend, flip it over, get the conversion tracking dialed in properly, and like pretty much almost guarantee it's going to double or triple in performance very quickly.
We mentioned before the property manager who had 30,000 email addresses but had done very little with them. How important is it for hosts and property managers to develop an email list, and what are the smartest ways to build it?
Yeah. So I think, again, I've redefined this lately to say like outbound messaging. So like email, I think, is the most important piece of information that I would get there. But we're trying more and more aggressively now for our clients to get SMS, like phone numbers, so we can do marketing in both channels. We have a client now, and we actually don't do their email or their SMS marketing. They do it in-house. They have an in-house team member that does it. But most months now, they get more traffic from their SMS list and analytics than they do from their email list. Their email list has been around for like 18, 19 years. They've been in business for a very long time. Their SMS list, I think, is 3 years old, 2 years old, something like that. So they only recently started focusing on phone number collection, but it's pretty much neck and neck most months, maybe a little bit up, a little bit down from where they get from email. So first of all, can you get both would be my initial question. Can you get email addresses and SMS, phone numbers as well? I would say would be a good starting point. Obviously fans of StayFi, but I think any sort of like method you have for offline collection is fine. I'm not like overly adamant that it's StayFi. I just think there's the friction point of how StayFi works is perfect, because it's like you want the Wi-Fi. So when you go and are presented with that little road bump, the email or the phone number in exchange for the Wi-Fi feels very fair in that moment of trade-off. When it's in like a welcome guide, or it's in a, hey, click here and, download this particular guide, or, through your phone number, your email, that still does work. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think it works as effectively. Some people won't do that versus the people who will do it in the moment of wanting the Wi-Fi in the property. So those are kind of my initial things with like offline collection. And there's so many things you can do for online collection. Like we're big fans, obviously, of pop-up modals on the website. I post about this at length on LinkedIn about most people have a pop-up modal on their website, but it's like sign up for a newsletter. No one wants a newsletter. What they want is some benefit, given to them. Discount code, a guide, something like that, an extra bonus or a perk in exchange for the email address. Those are things that work really well. And we're testing now some 2-step forms. So the first step is give us your email. Then it's, okay, unlock it after you give us your phone number. So we kind of put it in 2 different steps. And we've in early testing, that seems to convert a little bit better than asking for both in the initial pop-up, but more testing to come. So some of our forms still have two there right now. But yeah, I think it's just like collecting at every point. And then I think the thing that most people need to do is just automate something simple on the back end. So most of our clients, we just do a welcome series where it's like maybe 5-6 emails over a 2 or 3 week sequence once they get added to the list. So don't stress too much about like, oh, I'm adding people to my list all the time, I need to go and send them. Just set up an automation one time that's just going to work for you in the background, and have it be information about your company, your best listings, more about the area, whatever, right? It's not hard for you if you like your destination to talk about it for a few emails, right? And just have a few bullet points in there. So I think that's like a really valuable, tool to have, is like a collection portal of some kind, and an automation on the back end. And then you're just doing like maybe a newsletter every month. That shouldn't be overwhelming as far as time goes. And you can send out that same message through SMS as well. And you're going to be ahead of 90% of people just doing those things.
Makes a lot of sense. What's the one mistake that you wish every operator would stop doing this week?
I think it's probably just like understanding their property and where it sits, like where it sits in their, in the guest demand's eyes, and understanding how to make that property more desirable. And I think it's probably just being honest with yourself. I think that's probably the mistake that people make, is they sort of maybe like delude themselves, or they have this vision in their mind of what it could be, but they don't set it up. They don't have congruency with like how they think about their property or their marketing versus how it actually is. There's this disconnect that they have, and that's why they end up unhappy. It's like, that's where their unmet expectations come from, is this disconnect between those two things. So it's like, it's hard. And I'm the same way, we all have our own biases, and I tend to find them in my own business as well. But it's just like being honest, I think, with yourself about what you do have, what you don't have. And then taking action, right? Like that's the other thing, like doing very mediocre marketing is way, way better than doing no marketing. Right. So it's like, I have this client that I worked with a few years ago, and he, they were tight on budget. It wasn't his decision. It was like more of corporate's decision. And he cut his email marketing, and he started doing the email marketing himself. And this is a nice guy, but he can't design out of a paper bag. I mean, the worst designer I've ever seen. But you know what? They still get bookings every single month from his emails. They're ugly as heck, but they still get bookings every month because he sends them out. So if he sat there and said, I'm not a designer, these emails don't look good, I'm not going to send them out, they'd be getting 30, 40, 50, 60,000 per year less in bookings because he's sending them out and he's going out to the list and doing them. Now, does it pain me every time I get one in my inbox how ugly it is? Yes. Have I tried to sell him on us helping him do his emails? Yes. But it's actually a good like story reminder for me of like something's better than nothing. So if you're pontificating or thinking about doing something, that's not going to get you anywhere. If you do something, I promise you that at least get you to like good, and you got to be good before you can be great. So
I think it was Richard Branson who said, "Screw it, just do it. Let's do it. Get on with it."
I like that.
Let's before we get to the questions to finish, then let's finish on a positive note. So, what's the biggest marketing win that you've implemented for a property manager this year?
I mean, I have a funny example, and then I have a more practical example. So, funny example, I did an SEO audit not too long ago, like 2-3 months ago, and traffic just falling off a cliff, and all these problems, kind of arising from it. And I looked at all the obvious, signs of like, why is this property manager losing so much traffic? Supposedly, the site was indexable. There's nothing blocked in robots. I did all the normal SEO technical checks, and I get kind of deep in there, and then I realize I didn't actually look at the DNS layer. So I go look at the DNS layer, and at Cloudflare, they'd selected to block Googlebot. They were just like, yeah, Google, we don't want you to visit this website. And it was all the way at the Cloudflare level. So I didn't catch it on the website itself. It was like a little bit higher than that. So that was a good one. Uncheck that box, charge a client for an SEO audit, and all their traffic came back within like a few days, or maybe it took a week or something like that. So that was a good one to file away in the memory bank of like, you got to check everywhere. You can't assume that like the answer is obvious, or I have a little standard checklist I run through and it didn't fit into that bucket. So that was a good one to add to my checklist going forward. These things do happen, unfortunately. So that's one thing that comes to mind. The other thing I would say, in general, we have a client that we worked with for a long time. It's really just like understanding deeply what their core audience actually wants and positioning the ads that way. So we had ads running for this client for some time, and they were getting okay results. And we kind of just sat down at one point, and they'd had some changes internally, and we just kind of we're like, all right, let's just revisit this from the beginning. Like, we've been doing the same thing for a while. It's working okay. No one's unhappy. Like, the results are fine, but it's like, what does the guest actually want? And I kind of realized a lot of our messaging had just drifted over the years. Like, a few people worked on the ads, a few people worked on the copy, multiple people gave feedback internally and externally, and we just got away from like the actual properties and who they were meant for. We just kind of deleted all the existing ads. We started again from scratch, and we took everything, relaunched it, and we got like significantly better results, like double the bookings on the same budget, through this kind of process. So, and I think, again, knowing that like I'm saying things because like I've done them too, I'm guilty of them too. If the same thing's been running for a while, I do think it's like that biannual thing where you just sit down and look at everything. Like, do we still like our homepage copy? Do we still like all the autoresponder email? Do we still like our property descriptions? Do we still like our, ads that are going out on social media? And if not, like, yeah, maybe take some time every 6 months or every other quarter or something to just sit down and look at it. And maybe sometimes the answer is like, we're happy with it. It's fine. And that's cool. But then at least you did it. But sometimes you're like, ooh, this kind of drifted over the years. I don't know if this is actually where it should be. You come back, relaunch something. It feels fresh, feels new. And all of a sudden the results start getting better. So that's one that comes to mind as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm a writer by trade, and I'll look back at things that I've written. It might be 6 months ago. It might be 6 years ago. And sometimes I think, I cannot believe that I wrote that, and I'd completely change it and completely edit it or do it completely differently if I was to do it today. Just before we get to the questions to finish then, Conrad, tell us more about BuildUp Bookings and where people can find you.
Yeah, for sure. So BuildUp Bookings, we're a digital marketing agency that works specifically with short-term rental managers. So if that appeals to you, we do a lot of the services that we talked about on this podcast: search, social, email marketing. We do some website work as well. So yeah, go to buildupbookings.com, click the free call to action on the top right-hand corner. You book a call with our team, and we chat and see if we can help you. Very simple.
Superb. And we'll put those details in the show notes. Okay, then, questions to finish. Favorite brand in the STR industry and why?
All right, so I'm going to pick one that's dead because it's a shame what they did to them. I think Luxury Retreats was the best OTA that I've ever seen in execution, in quality of inventory, quality of properties, their marketing, everything they did was like top notch. And it's a shame that it's gone. So like, pour one out for Luxury Retreats. Airbnb bought them at this point. It's like more than 5 years ago, I would imagine. But when I think of like brands that I stick in my brain as like that were so well executed and so well done and had the right audience, had the right property, we're actually making everybody happy, like a win-win all around. Luxury Retreats comes to mind. And yeah, whatever Airbnb did with Airbnb Lux is nothing like what it once was. So like, if you're new to the industry, you don't know that brand, but like drop it in archive.org and like look at the mastery that was Luxury Retreats, because I think that was an amazing brand. Current brands that are actually exist today, just so we don't pontificate on stuff that's gone. So Fieldtrip is a client that we have. I hate to pick a client, but I feel like they're one that really stick out to me as one that I really enjoy looking at. So if you go to stayfieldtrip.com, they manage really iconic properties like the Invisible House in Joshua Tree, California, and some surrounding markets like Malibu and stuff like that. Their execution on brand, their execution on a lot of their social stuff. We don't do their social stuff, to be clear. We do just some of their paid ad stuff. Is really, really well done. And I think they've nailed down this idea of like, what does the brand actually stand for all the way through, like from click to the actual booking experience. They understand it well. The reviews are phenomenal. They do a really good job. The founders are very like logical, thoughtful people who like want to have everybody win. Like the team members win, the guests like the experience, the owners are making money, and it's rare to find that nowadays. Usually you find people cutting corners. So those are two that come to mind.
Great shout out there for Fieldtrip. Somebody in the STR industry that you'd like to give a shout out to, and why?
Yeah. Well, okay. So this case, I don't know when this will come out exactly, but like Tyann was just announced as Tyann Marcink was just announced as one of the board directors for VRMA, and just someone who actually deeply understands all the problems in our space. I think back to front, like what a great person to bring on to lead some of the decisions or some of the processes at VRMA. I mean, she gets shout outs. She's good at promoting, obviously, and Tyann does a lot of different things, and sometimes it's hard to keep up with her because she has so many things going on. But yeah, just someone who I think, like, again, I've seen her work like up close. Like we had a conference one year and she was like taking guest calls in the back of a van. Like we were all in an Uber riding to a, dinner or something. And she's trying to, troubleshoot a guest call while she's at this conference. And of course her team was handling some of it as well from, where she was at. But yeah, someone like that I think just actually has gone through everything, tries to make everything great, like tries to actually do it the right way, front to back. And if you go look at reviews, go look at her properties, how she executes upon them, everything she thinks about in the property. I think that's someone that really understands stuff really well. And Tyann's, I think, a good example for sure.
The queen of guest experience. And we will be seeing her soon in Kansas City for her World Cup hosting event. I'm heading over for that in November. So very much looking forward to taking part in that. Final question then, Conrad. Number one lesson learned since founding BuildUp Bookings.
It's going to take a lot more work than you think, unfortunately. So I think that, I said it earlier, right? Take some kind of action, but I think it's like momentum begets momentum. So if you get going, your first versions of it are, like you said, the first thing that you write, 6 months later, you hate it, but you wouldn't have got to like the next step until you did that first step. So I think it's just like, it's going to take more work it took more work than I thought for everything, especially as we gotten bigger. When it was small and I could handle everything, it wasn't that hard. And then as we gotten bigger, it's having to translate my knowledge in my brain into my team that I think is really hard. And it's constant reinforcement, it's constant reminders, it's constant, hey, this is how we do it. It's constant culture building. And yeah, if you take a day off, you're fine. But if you take like a week off or 2 weeks off or 3 weeks off, they can start to kind of go the wrong way. So this idea of like passive income or everything just works, you hit a button and people just show up and do what they need to do is a complete fallacy. And it takes a lot more work than you think. But, you cannot lose if you do not quit, right? So it's like, that's kind of the momentum and the thing that I've had to learn the hard way over the past 9 years now. So.
I like that. You can't lose if you don't quit. Great way to finish. Conrad, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for joining us on the Host Planet podcast.
Appreciate it.
Great to chat to Conrad O'Connell there from BuildUp Bookings. Build your email list, tweak your website, and watch those direct bookings roll in. All right, that's it for today's show. Remember, this podcast is brought to you in collaboration with Hostfully, which is trusted by short-term rental professionals across the globe. As a House Planet listener, you get 2 exclusive offers. $500 off onboarding for Hostfully's property management software. Just use the code PLANET500 and 30% off digital guidebooks for life. Use the code HousePlanetGB. To grab these deals, click the link in the show notes or head to housefully.com. For more free education, tips and trends from the STR industry, visit houseplanet.club, where you can sign up for our newsletter, listen to our podcasts, and download a suite of ebooks for hosts and property managers. That's it for today's episode. Until next time, happy hosting.